Hello, my name is JT Herber. I have been an attorney here in Schuylkill County for over 20 years. Most of my practice involves litigation, resolving disputes for businesses of all sizes as well as for individuals. In addition, I handle real estate transactions as well as estate planning and probate. Outside of the practice of law, I've also served on a school board for almost a decade and I've owned various properties here in Schuylkill County. With this background, I thought it would be helpful to prepare a series of short informational videos to discuss the Schuylkill County Tax Assessment Appeals process and what you can do if you believe that your property has been overvalued. To begin, let's start with talking about what the reassessment is and what it is not. Schuylkill County's last countywide reassessment was conducted in 1996, 30 years ago. Gas prices at that time were about $1.23 a gallon, milk was about $2.75 a gallon, and minimum wage was increasing from about $4.25 an hour to $4.75 an hour. A lot has changed. The purpose of this new reassessment is to revalue properties as to what they are worth now. With over 90,000 properties in Schuylkill County, this is, understandably, a huge undertaking. Many individuals are asking, why is a reassessment being done now as opposed to a few years ago or a few years from now? Well, in 2019, an organization called the Community Justice Project filed a lawsuit on behalf of a couple of Schuylkill County property owners. They claimed in that lawsuit that the 1996 assessment values were significantly outdated, and as a result, the tax burden due to the valuations on properties was unfair. To be clear, our law firm had absolutely no role in that litigation. However, there were many assessed values on properties in Schuylkill County which didn't seem to even come close to reality, which did indeed create at least some unfairness. As a case in point, there was one situation where there was a 4-unit row home. This was a typical 4-unit Schuylkill County row home. It's common throughout our area. 1 unit on the left, 2 units on the center, and another unit on the right. One of those end units was having to pay approximately $700 more in property taxes per year than the other end unit, even though both of these units were the same sized units, in the same condition, built at the same time, on the same street, in the same neighborhood, in the same municipality, and in the same school district. In 2022, after several years of litigation, the Schuylkill County Commissioners agreed to settle this lawsuit. As part of that settlement, the County Commissioners stated that they would obtain a new county-wide reassessment. Here we are. To conduct this process, the county solicited bids and ultimately hired Vision Solutions, which named Tim Barr as its project director. Mr. Barr was previously involved in the 1996 countywide reassessment. In turn, the company then hired and trained a group of data collectors who visited every property in Schuylkill County. You may have encountered one of these individuals at your home or perhaps your place of business. To be clear, these individuals were data collectors, not appraisers. They weren't trained as appraisers, nor were they licensed as appraisers. Instead, as data collectors, the job of these individuals was to take various measurements of properties, photograph the properties, classify buildings on the properties by the type of construction, the style, the condition, determine whether or not the properties had various access to public utilities, and collect data on other factors. All of this data was ultimately organized and fed into a formula that was intended to create new property values. Naturally, this means that none of these data collectors went into any homes or businesses to assess the interior condition. Further, no one is perfect. Inevitably, with over 90,000 properties, mistakes will have been made as part of the data collection process. For example, a home could have been listed as having an extra bedroom or a bathroom. Perhaps the wrong type of heating system was recorded, or perhaps the data says that the home has a finished basement when the reality is that it had an unfinished basement. Any of those factors might affect the valuation, and that's before we even determine whether or not the formula accurately produced a valuation for your specific property. After this data was collected, various methods were then utilized in an attempt to test the accuracy of the formula and make adjustments to it. This process eventually led to the mailing of the final value notifications, which were sent out to all property owners on July 1. At a recent meeting, Mr. Barr indicated that approximately 1/3 of properties in Schuylkill County will see a decrease in their valuation. Another 1/3 will see minimal to no change. Meanwhile, the remaining 1/3 of properties will see a moderate to significant increase in their valuations and a corresponding increase in their tax burden. This means that there will be approximately 30,000 properties in Schuylkill County facing an increased valuation and a corresponding increased tax burden for many years to come. Understandably, many individuals are upset, if not outraged, about their new valuations. Along the way, I've heard a lot of statements being made that this is some sort of money grab for the county or school district or borough to somehow radically increase taxes. If you are dissatisfied with this process, I encourage you to reach out to your county commissioners and exercise your First Amendment rights to express your concerns. However, if you do that, it is important to understand that this is not a means of increasing taxes for everyone. In fact, state law requires that tax millage rates must be reset after an assessment is conducted, so that the total amount of taxes generated under the new assessment is equal to the taxes generated in the prior tax year. How does that work? Taxes are set based on mills. A mill equals $1 of tax for each $1,000 in property valuation. I don't really want to take a deep dive into the math here, so let's just use a simplified example. Let's say that in a particular township, the new assessment doubles the value of the properties. In that case, when the township levies property tax for its next year, it needs to take its prior millage rate and cut that millage rate in half. In turn, the township would end up generating the same amount of money in tax revenue. You don't have to just take my word for it. On this slide, you'll see the actual state law, which requires that when a county implements a countywide revision of assessment, the taxing district is legally obligated to reduce the tax rate so that the total amount of taxes does not exceed the revenue that it obtained through levies in the prior year. So what's next? At this point, each property owner should have received 2 different value notifications for each property which they own. The first was called a preliminary value notification, and those were sent in May. Then, on July 1, the final value notifications were mailed. At this point, you should focus on the final value notification, as those are the numbers being relied upon for this new countywide reassessment. If the value of your property in that final value notification seems exceptionally high, and if you're facing a significant tax increase, you may want to consider appealing the valuation. In the next video, I will discuss the assessment appeals process and what our firm is doing to help local property owners obtain fair assessments through this process. Our work includes representation not only of residential property owners, but also commercial, agricultural, and industrial property owners